prefer the majority text, the Byzantine text, or the Textus Receptus. Alright, although they are not completely the same, but for the sake of our discussion now, Textus Receptus and majority text we see as the same. Why do I prefer the Byzantine text, the majority text, the Textus Receptus? Because I must say that most of the New Testament scholars prefer the critical text, right? The text weighed by so much factors like the age, location, etc. Well, it has to do with, first of all, here. It is by far the majority of the manuscripts. Between 90 and 95% of the manuscripts are from this time. We can't ignore that fact. A second thing is that according to some very old sources, one of them is Origen, and he is from Egypt, from Alexandria. He himself wrote that the Alexandrian text, right, are more corrupt than the other text. He considered the Alexandrian text as corrupt. He himself. So, for me at least, and for more theologians, this is a pointer that probably the Byzantine texts are more reliable, although they are younger, than the older Alexandrian text. Because of the Origen is not the only one who says it. And then another important reason, the Textus Receptus, or the Byzantine, the majority text, right, 95% of the text, they were used by all apostolic churches. The Peshitta, a very old Syrian translation, right, in the Western family, AD 150. By the Old Latin Vulgate, the Latin translation of the Greek text, right, the Western text. By all lectionaries, by the Catholic Church in northern Italy, by the Gallic Church in southern France. In other words, I am personally convinced that the Byzantine texts are more reliable than the Alexandrian text, and that's why I prefer the King James, and why I prefer the Textus Receptus to the New King James. Well, let's move on. There is a little bit more about translations. The first thing, when we begin a translation, right, we have to make a choice, right, of several Bible translations. Well, those translators, first of all, right, they have to make a choice which text approach do they use. Do they use the Byzantine, the majority text, like the King James and the New King James, or do they use the Alexandrian text, like the more modern translators do? Well, that's the first. That's clear by now. But then they have to determine how to translate based on the text they determined. Is it a word-for-word translation? In other words, word by word is translated. Of course, this is as close as possible to that original text, because it translates word by word by word. But because Greek and Hebrew are different texts, languages than English, it makes the translation difficult to read, hard to read. Right? The structure of the sentence might be difficult because, right, Greek has another structure in the sentences than English. So a word-by-word translation, although very close to the original text, is hard to read. This is one of the reasons why, for example, the King James is quite difficult. Another approach would be a thought-for-thought approach. We take a phrase in the text, and we translate that phrase. So not word by word, but we take a phrase, a couple words, a part of a sentence, and we translate it. We try to understand what is the thought in this phrase. And then the translation is that thought. So it is not a real literal translation, word by word, but thought by thought. And then even more free is what we call a it's actually almost a retelling. We read the original text, and then with our own words in contemporary English, we convey the message, what we think that the message is. So lots of freedom here, easy to understand, but far removed from the original text. Well, since we are standing awe before God's Word, and God's Word is originally written in Greek and Hebrew, I prefer, and then you with me, a word-for-word translation. Although, indeed, it's more difficult to read, it is closer to the original Bible text written in Greek and Hebrew. But it requires more study. What can be helpful is to use a thought-for-thought translation to get some ideas. What could be the meaning of, a certain word, a phrase, etc. So to read different translations next to each other. Well, the King James here is word-for-word translation. The New King James is, and there are more like the MEV. I circled the MEV because the MEV is a modern translation, also based, like the King James and New King James, on the Byzantine text, the majority text. So the circled translations here are based on the Byzantine text. So the King James, the New King James, and the MEV. And the MEV is a contemporary translation. All the others are based on the critical approach, the critical text. You see many translations. If I'm well informed, there are over 900 translations in English alone. Well, here at the right hand, the Bible translations based on the Textus Receptus, the majority text. The King James, the New King James, the NEV, Modern English Version, 2014. But we also have, not mentioned here, the Literal Standard Version, translated in 2020. And you see that one of the most literal translations, but based on a critical approach, but one of the most literal is the NASB. So in that regard, a very reliable translation, but based on different texts. Short, some other Bible study. It's the main purpose for today was, that you have the tools to determine yourself what translations to use, and that you have an idea how to make your choice for a translation. Well, I hope it will be helpful for you. Some other Bible study aids. Well, of course, use several translations. Many of them are available for free on the internet. For example, in the Blue Letter Bible, on Bible Hub. Use reference systems. My Bible here, for example, has a reference system here. Sometimes we have reference systems between the columns, but many Bibles have reference systems. Very helpful. They point you to other texts that have a relationship with a particular text here in this passage. There are many different cross-reference systems, but very helpful. Study Bibles. Use study Bibles. I personally use now and then the Reformation Heritage Study Bible and the Reformation Study Bible. R.C. Sproul was the editor. But then we have, of course, commentaries. When I buy a commentary, personally, I always use the website Best Commentaries to determine the best available commentary according to some norms, of course, but it's a very helpful site. It reviews all available commentaries, and those reviews are helpful, at least for me as a pastor. But you can find many commentaries free online. The website Monarchism, an excellent website with so much information on it. Reformed books online, they have lots of commentaries. Then we have concordances, right? An alphabetical list of words used in the Bible. Free online. Dictionaries, very helpful. Free online. Baker, Easton, etc. We have encyclopedia, free online. Atlases, free online. There is so much information. Lastly, what commentaries do I recommend? Well, first of all, I personally always use, first of all, the classical commentaries. John Calvin, Matthew Paul, Matthew Henry. Always. But I always also use some contemporary commentaries. Because those are a little bit older. And here, those commentaries are more up to date. Because a lot has been discovered since the time of John Calvin, Matthew Paul, and Matthew Henry. Right? Lots have been discovered in terms of language, and word studies, archaeology, etc. So John Calvin didn't have the knowledge that we have. So it's good to read next to such a classical commentary that's totally reformed, a contemporary. So some of my recommendations, Kyle and Delitzsch, Expository Bible Commentary, the Pillar Commentaries, the Tyndale, the Reformed Expository, all of them recommended. Oh, my text is doing a bit strange. Well, there is also Bible software and apps you could use. I use personally both the Olive Tree Bible app on my phone and my tablet. The basic version is for free and it includes already a lot. And you can buy other books and commentaries. Excellent Bible app. One that is excellent for pastors is the Logos Bible software. From this month onward, they have a subscription model that makes this probably a bit more affordable because it was really expensive, thousands of dollars. But they moved to a subscription model. And then we have free software and apps like YouVersion and eSword. We have the Blue Letter Bible. Well, there is a lot. And I would say use it. There is so much information and also reliable information. Well, that's it for today. I hope it was helpful, that you got some ideas about different translations and how to use them, and which translation to choose, and where to find some Bible study aids. Well, thank you so much, and hope to see you next time, the Lord willing. Bye.